Resolution 1099, adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 38, and the motion to recommit H.R. 774 and passage of H.R. 7744. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mass, to suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 1099, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
House Resolution 1099, resolution reaffirming Iran remains the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to the resolution? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 372, the nays are 53, 2 recorded as present. 2/3 being the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 38, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
Concurrent Resolution 38, concurrent resolution directing the President pursuant to Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to remove United States Armed Forces from unauthorized hostilities in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The question is on the adoption of the concurrent resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 212, the nays are 219. The concurrent resolution is not adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is a question on agreeing to the motion to recommit on H.R. 7744, offered by the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will redesignate the motion.
Motion to recommit H.R. 7744, offered by Ms. DeLauro of Connecticut.
The question is on agreeing to the motion to recommit. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. This vote, the yeas are 213, the nays are 215. This vote, the yeas are 212, the nays are 217. The motion is not adopted. The question is on the passage of the bill. Pursuant to Clause 10 of Rule 20, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. The yeas are 221. The nays are 209. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that in the engrossment of H.R. 6392, the clerk be directed to make the correction I have placed on the desk.
Clerk will report.
On page 3, line 15, strike "this act" and insert "this title."
Without objection, so ordered.
Give a better speech.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the clerk be authorized to make technical corrections in the engrossment of H.R. 7744 to include corrections in spelling, punctuation, section numbering, and cross-referencing, and the insertion of appropriate headings.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that I may be hereafter considered as the first sponsor of H.R. 537, Increased Housing Affordability Act, a bill originally introduced by Representative Sherrill of New Jersey for the purposes of adding co-sponsors and requesting reprintings pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 12.
Without objection. Flying home. Am I switching? Okay. So, how do we get order? Order in the chamber. For what purposes, gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House out of order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For nearly 2 decades, Westchester's own Richard Dick Ottinger walked in these halls as a congressman and served in this chamber, representing his neighbors with insight and energy. He was first elected to the House in 1964. He left to seek a seat in the United States Senate in 1970, but returned here in 1974 to serve 10 more years. He was an early leader on environmental issues before they became commonplace, and his advocacy for the cleanup of the Hudson River benefited generations to follow. In his post-congressional years, he turned to teaching as a professor at Pace University School of Law, with a building being named in his honor. We lost Dick Ottinger on February 16th, and he joins in our memories the great House members from New York that we've recently lost, Charlie Rangel and Nita Lowey. Dick, like them, is a role model for all of us who serve here today. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor him.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, friends. Absolutely. I appreciate it. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Order in the chamber. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order.
Without objection.
Friends, I rise today to honor 6 Americans, including 2 Iowans, who gave their lives for our country. On March 1st, an Iranian drone struck a U.S. Army command center in Kuwait and killed 6 members of the 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command in the Army Reserve, which operates out of Fort Des Moines in Iowa, in my district. I want to speak first about these 2 young Hawkeyes. Sergeant Declan Cody of West Des Moines was only 20 years old. He was one of the youngest men in his unit, and by every account, one of the best. He trained as an IT specialist with the Army Reserves while studying cybersecurity at my alma mater, Drake University, right here in Des Moines. He was taking classes online from Kuwait while he defended our country in order to become an officer in the U.S. Army. Last week, he proudly told his father he'd been recommended for promotion from specialist to sergeant. And I'm happy to say, posthumously, he achieved that very honorable rank. With him was Major Jeffrey O'Brien, 45, of Waukee and before Indianola, Iowa, a senior officer in the same unit who spent decades in service. He gave his life keeping our forces in Kuwait safe and Americans at home guarded. I want to say the name of every one of our fallen, because every family represented here today amongst my colleagues from each state where they grew, lived, and served honor this nation in our moment of national heartbreak. Sergeant First Class Nicole Armour, 39, of White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Captain Cody Hork, 35, of Winter Haven, Florida. Sergeant First Class Noah Tijens, 42, of Bellevue, Nebraska. And Chief Warrant Officer 3, Robert Marzan, 54, of Sacramento, California. Out of grief, we renew our resolve. Out of loss, we strengthen our unity. And out of sacrifice, we carry forward an obligation to the families, to the survivors, to our nation, to every man and woman still standing the post today. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask the House now observe a moment of silence in honor of our fallen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back. Yep.
Yeah. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is easy to criticize anti-Semitism when it happens on the other side. It is more difficult to address it when it happens on your own. It was not enough for Tucker Carlson to a few days ago say every Jew should have to do a DNA test to prove that they were Jewish. It was not enough for him to say that a terrorist should be able to kill us if they are under 18 years old. But yesterday, Tucker Carlson attacked perhaps the best, the most good group of Jews that are out there, a group of people who see their job to evangelize not other Jews, but Jews themselves, Chabad, a group that no one ever has anything bad to say about because they care about everyone. I wear a kippah from UF Chabad today in honor of them. We have a cancer in this country. It is anti-Semitism, and Tucker Carlson represents it. He is many things, but one thing President Trump and I agree on is he is certainly not MAGA. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Trump has launched us into a war of choice with Iran, with no clear explanation, yet we know some of the consequences. 6 U.S. service members have been killed, dozens injured. More than 40,000 of our troops, including hundreds of Pennsylvanians, are at risk. Thousands of American citizens stranded. I do not mourn the loss of Ayatollah Khomeini, yet I am gravely concerned about the danger and destruction that Mr. Trump has unleashed in the Middle East. Abraham Lincoln wrote that our founders resolved to so frame the Constitution that no one man should hold the power to bring oppression of war upon our nation. That power lies with Congress because we are closest to the people, and it is why I voted today in favor of the War Powers Resolution. Mr. Speaker, I lift the names of our fallen soldiers just as our colleagues did a moment ago. I lift their names in prayer. Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amar, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, Sergeant Declan Cody, Major Jeffrey O'Brien, Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzan. God bless them. God bless their families. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is now recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Ezra and Cleo Teeters from Waverly, Ohio. Ezra and Cleo represent an extraordinary love story that spans more than 8 decades. Ezra and Cleo met as children growing up in the same neighborhood and sharing the same bus ride. Their life has been full of love and amazing memories, as together they have 1 son, 2 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Their marriage began in the middle of a snowstorm during the Christmas season of 1945 when Ezra was on leave from his service in the Army in World War II. Ezra and Cleo drove across the Ohio border into Kentucky to get married at the age of 19. Ezra and Cleo kept this secret, telling everyone they were going to Christmas shopping, but really they were going to get married. This year, both Ezra and Cleo will celebrate their 100th birthdays. I wish them continued health and congratulate them on their amazing life that they have shared together over the past 8 decades. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Arizona seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is now recognized for 1 minute.
Okay. As we begin Women's History Month, I rise to recognize a true leader from Southern Arizona, Deanna Lewis. In 1984, Deanna became the first woman and the first Black woman to serve in the Tucson Fire Department. In a profession where few women had previously worked, she stepped forward anyway, not to make history, but to protect and care for her community. Over a 20-year career in the fire departments of both Tucson and Tubac, Deanna demonstrated strength, integrity, and a deep commitment to Southern Arizona families. Because of her, more women now see themselves in uniform, in leadership, and in public service. This Women's History Month, we honor Deanna Lewis for her trailblazing leadership and recommit ourselves to building a future where every young woman, whether she dreams of fighting fires or serving in the halls of Congress, knows there is a place for her. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Wyoming seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to recognize and congratulate Jen Womack of Newcastle, Wyoming, for being named the 2025 Person of the Year by the Newsletter Journal. Jen has long been a cornerstone of both her Newcastle community and our state. You may know her name from her time diligently reporting for the Wyoming Livestock Roundup, the extensive work she has done to document history in both Converse County and the history of the origins of the Pathfinder Ranch, or from the impact she made on so many of our young people during her time leading the Wyoming FFA Foundation. She has now opened 2 thriving small businesses on Main Street in Newcastle and has established a community support fund called the Sunshine Fund. Jen is like a rising tide who lifts her community and her neighbors. She represents all that is great about the Cowboy State and truly embodies the tight-knit community spirit found across Wyoming. Please join me in recognizing and celebrating the accomplishments of Newcastle, Wyoming's Jen Womack, and I yield back.
For what purposes the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Much has been said about the president's war in Iran. He has not made the case clear to the American people about what he's looking to achieve. Regime change from the air may be unlikely and may result in a more extreme, hostile, and dangerous regime than existed before. All of that is true. But what's truly unacceptable is the cost, both in American blood and American treasure. We don't know yet the cost of the war, but by some estimates, as much as $1 billion a day. The president has said 4 to 6 weeks, and that translates to $28 to $42 billion. I've heard even more alarming reports from senior DOD officials earlier today. That money won't be spent on lowering working Americans' grocery bills, prescription drugs, and gas at the pump. But the most horrifying cost is the 6 Americans who have been killed, including one who was a constituent that lived in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. And yesterday, the Secretary of Defense said it's tragic news that is reported because the press only wants to make the president look bad. That's outrageous and beyond the pale. This is not about the president. It's not about the secretary. It's about the service members. The American people are deeply concerned about our sons and daughters and are dying in a war that just 27% support. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Hoosier State of Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life of legendary college football coach Lou Holtz, who passed away this week at the age of 89. Over a truly remarkable 33-year coaching career, Coach Holtz won 249 games at football programs across the country. Most of all, Coach Holtz is best remembered for restoring Notre Dame football to greatness. In 1988, he guided the Fighting Irish to a perfect 12-0 season in a national championship, cementing his place among the greatest leaders in the history of college football. But Coach Holtz's legacy goes far beyond wins and championships. He was known for his faith, his commitment to protecting life, and his ability to inspire young men to strive for excellence on and off the field. He was also an honorary trustee at Trine University in my district. From humble beginnings in West Virginia to the College Football Hall of Fame, Lou Holtz embodied perseverance, discipline, and leadership. Today, we remember a legendary coach who shaped the game of college football and the lives of countless players. May he rest in peace. I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today with grave concerns about President Trump's unwarranted and unconstitutional war of choice on Iran. Only Congress has the authority to declare war. The president does not have the power to send our nation to war unilaterally. We are now in an escalating conflict that the American people do not want and that Congress did not authorize. Senior Trump administration officials have failed to provide significant evidence of an imminent threat to justify this attack, and there is no consensus on when it will end. What is their plan to prevent further loss of American service members? What will stop our country from being pulled into another protracted conflict in the Middle East? And how much will it cost? This is why I just voted for a war powers resolution to curb President Trump's use of military force in Iran and protect American lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize a true gem of the Colorado Springs region, the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, otherwise known around the world as the Race to the Clouds. Founded by entrepreneur and philanthropist Spencer Penrose over 100 years ago, it's grown exponentially from its beginnings, being the second oldest auto race in America and one of the most iconic motorsports events. Many racing legends have pushed the limits of their automobiles to take on the hill climb, which course includes 156 turns to the top of America's mountain and a finishing elevation of 14,115 feet above sea level. Even today, it draws competitors, media, and fans from around the world, highlighting Colorado Springs as a premier destination for outdoor recreation, innovation, and international sport. Mr. Speaker, I ask that you join me in celebrating 104 years of remarkable tradition at Pikes Peak. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor the remarkable career and accomplishments of Minneapolis journalist Ed Feline, founder and editor of Southside Pride. For over 55 years, Mr. Feline worked to encourage civic debate and uplift local voices through community news. After working as a journalist, college professor, and a Minneapolis City Council member, Ed started Southside Pride in 1991, a free monthly newspaper publishing community news for Phillips, Powderhorn, Riverside, and Seward neighborhoods. For 35 years, Ed and his team have kept Southsiders informed with reliable and informative news covering the breadth of topics from local events to international conflicts. While we will miss their reporting, we congratulate Ed and the staff of Southside Pride on their journalistic accomplishments and wish Ed well in his retirement. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to congratulate North Texan Hannah Bilka of the U.S. women's hockey team for winning gold at the 2026 Milan Olympics. Hannah grew up in Coppell, Texas, where she began skating with local hockey clubs at a young age. She graduated from Coppell Middle School North and completed 9th grade at New Tech High School before moving to pursue more opportunities in competitive hockey. At just 24 years old, Hannah competed on the world stage against rival Team Canada in the Olympic final. Her talent and sportsmanship were on full display in Milan this year, where she scored 4 goals over 7 games and helped lead Team USA throughout the tournament and on to a gold medal victory. Her journey from local rinks in North Texas to Olympic champion is inspiring to many young Olympics and many young athletes across the Lone Star State. Thank you, Hannah, for representing North Texas and the United States in such an incredible way. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
My remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The guarantee of free and fair elections is the very bedrock of our democracy. However, from the moment this term began, there's been made every effort to subvert the electoral process for political gain. We continue to hear the big lie about the 2020 election and pressure lawmakers across the country to redraw congressional districts for political purposes. We saw insurrectionists pardoned. Most recently, there's a call for this party to nationalize voting in the United States. That is why this week I introduced the POINT Act, because our elections must remain insulated from bad faith actors who seek to undermine the will of the voters. This bill would prohibit the president and senior members of his administration from knowingly engaging in election interference or using federal resources to interfere with an election. It prohibits the deployment of our military and federal officers if such is likely to disrupt an election. Postal confiscation of all mail ballots, ICE or National Guard looming at the polls. It's imperative we strengthen the guardrails of our democracy against anyone who seeks to abuse power.
The gentleman's
for
time has
political
expired.
gain. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Judge Patrick Shepard for his recent appointment to the State Court of Spalding County, filling a vacancy created by Georgia State House Bill 798. Previously, Judge Shepard served as Solicitor General of Spalding County, where he prosecuted misdemeanor cases in the Spalding County State Court. Shepard was also a partner in the Shepard Law Offices, where he practiced with his father. He represented clients in civil litigation, criminal defense, personal injury, and estate matters. Shepard earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Georgia, go Dogs, in 2005, and his Juris Doctor from Mercer University School of Law in 2009. He is a lifelong resident of Spalding County with deep ties to the community through the Spalding County Bar Association, the First Baptist Church, and the Griffin Exchange Club. Judge Shepard and his wife, Robin, have 2 daughters and live in Griffin, Georgia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Alberto Gutierrez Reyes died at ICE's Adelanto holding facility recently, allegedly because of a lack of access to medical care for chronic conditions. I visited this facility just weeks ago and was prevented from speaking with the detainees to verify the claims made by ICE staff that they were adequately taking care of the detainees' medical issues. This is despite the law and courts clearly giving members of Congress explicit oversight authorities. I will be returning to Adelanto and demanding answers from the agency that has billions of dollars to quote unquote protect the homeland, but could not provide basic medical care for someone who was in their custody. Until there is justice for Alberto's family and the other families impacted by ICE's brutality and recklessness, I will be voting no on any new funding for ICE or CBP. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Thank you. I'd like to ask make a unanimous request to a unanimous request to speak for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Obviously, the Department of Homeland Security has been in the paper a lot lately. I want to remind people of these facts. We are already letting in about 800,000 people every year legally in this country. Which is an all-time high by a mile. We already have 1/6 of the people who are born in this country, or 1/6 of the people in this country are born in another country, which is also an all-time high. We are already letting in 500,000 people every year on work visas. Perhaps that should be higher, but you add up those last 3 numbers, and it tells you we are not in desperate need of letting more people in this country. There are people who only want to kick out people who have a criminal record. First of all, it would be very unfair to the people who obeyed the law to come here. Secondly, it means we may be letting in hardworking people, but people who don't share our values. Third, it means you're driving up housing costs. And fourth, it means America will become more crowded. And I'm old enough to remember when all good environmentalists did not want a lot of immigrants here because they wanted a more natural state. But in any event, these are things we should remember when discussing immigration. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate Charlie McAvoy, a proud native of Long Beach and New York 4, on representing the United States at the 2026 Winter Olympics and bringing home a gold medal as a member of the men's ice hockey team. Charlie's journey from local rinks to the very top of the Olympic podium is a powerful testament to the talent, the dedication, and discipline. His success stands as a model for aspiring athletes not only across Long Island, but across our country. Charlie's story sends a clear and inspiring message. Greatness can grow from our neighborhoods, our schools, and our hometown arenas. With hard work, resilience, and belief in yourself, dreams that begin at home can carry you to the highest stages in the world. On behalf of Long Island, I extend our heartfelt congratulations to Charlie and his family. We thank you for representing our community and our country. May your achievement remain a source of pride for Long Islanders and an inspiration for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to address the House, and my first time addressing the House to honor my predecessor, the late, great Sylvester Turner. Our congressman, a Houstonian through and through. He was a public servant who served with honor and integrity. He was a father and a grandfather, and he was the mayor of our phenomenal city. During his time as mayor, he led us through multiple natural disasters. He ensured that we had diversity and access to our government, and he fought for voting rights. The late congressman left big shoes to fill, but I intend to fill them, and I know that my colleagues on the Democratic side will do so as well by fighting for voting rights legislation that ensures that every single person has fair access to the ballot box. Today, I'm here to honor our late Congressman Sylvester Turner. May we fight for voting rights, and Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition. Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate General Casimir Pulaski Day, which took place earlier this week, honoring his enduring legacy of service to our nation when it was very young. He was a native son of Poland, and he became a hero in the American Revolution. He brought to our shores an unshakable love of liberty and military courage. On the battlefields of our revolution, Pulaski's strategic brilliance and bravery helped forge what would become the American cavalry. He shed his blood for a nation not yet his own, proving that the cause of liberty knows no borders. We are proud to honor the deep bonds between the United States and Poland. It is an alliance rooted in shared sacrifice and shared democratic values. My fellow co-chairs of the Congressional Poland Caucus and other members of this chamber have introduced a resolution honoring 250 years of Polish-American relations. May Pulaski's timeless example continue to inspire us to defend freedom wherever it is threatened, to remain steadfast partners in its cause. Onward together for your freedom and ours. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Rhode Islanders are struggling with Trump's affordability crisis. Yet, instead of focusing on the needs of the American people, Trump started a war of choice with Iran. Now 6 American service members are dead, thousands of Americans are stranded, and the risk of a wider war is growing, all while spending $1 billion a day of your taxpayer dollars. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and the Iranian people deserve self-determination, but starting a war without a vote in Congress is not a strategy. It is reckless. Trump has offered no clear objective, no day after plan or endgame, and our Constitution is clear. Congress decides when we go to war. I voted yes on the War Powers Resolution to stop Trump from further destabilizing the Middle East, to prevent more casualties, and to stop this madness. One man should not be able to drag America into another foreign war, and we must keep fighting to stop these actions that are leaving Americans and the world less safe at a major cost to all of us. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I rise to recognize the recipients of the 2026 Women's History Project Woman of the Year Awards as Ohio's 13th Congressional District's Champions of the Week. This month, the Women's History Project Committee will honor 8 women from Summit County for their contributions to the community, aligning with the 2026 theme of Leading the Change, Women Shaping a Sustainable Future. One of these inspiring women is Katanya Ford, a constituent advocate in my Akron office. She is receiving the Woman to Watch Award, which is given to a woman under the age of 30 who has already shown potential for making lasting contributions to her community, state, or country. And trust me, she is more than deserving. Other award recipients include Sarah Abood, who will receive the Initiative Award, Laura Davis, who will receive the Perseverance Award, Lily Jackson, who will receive the Pioneer Award, Lois Matney, who will receive the Inspiration Award, Miriam Ray, who will receive the Imagination Award, Kathy Rest, who will receive the Faith Award, and Jane Startzman, who will receive the Creativity Award. Thank you to these phenomenal women for leading the way and providing such an impressive example. It is everyday citizens do remarkable things who help make our community the birthplace of champions. Recipients of the 2026 Women's History Project Woman of the Year Awards are certainly champions in their own right who have made Summit County and Ohio's 13th Congressional District proud. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
To address the House.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the grieving families of the service members killed. I rise on behalf of the little girls in Iran killed by bombs raining down on their schools. Constituents in my district are horrified to see the United States and Israel launch a war with Iran that has already spread to a dozen more countries. Parents are clutching their young sons as they remember stories from their grandparents about the boys sacrificed to the draft. They see the baby girls in Iran, their small bodies decimated as their own daughters. Mr. Speaker, I implore my colleagues, when a nation loses care and concern for children, all the children, a nation becomes irredeemable. The children of the world are all of ours, always. Small men wage endless wars because they are looking to profit. They believe their privilege and connections will shelter their own children from the frontline horrors of war, but our destinies are tied, Mr. Speaker. We rise and fall together. Trump has no plan of how many lives will be sacrificed before it is enough. We will not tolerate his callous disregard for human life. End this war now.
What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Can you lift this up a little bit? That's great. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. This is Women's History Month, and I rise to introduce my constituent of the week. Her name is Alyssa Liu. 20 years old, raised in Oakland, educated in Oakland, and trained in Oakland. 2 weeks ago in Milan, Alyssa brought home 2 Olympic gold medals to the United States of America. The first American woman on the top of that podium in 24 years. She walked away from skating at 16 and came back on her own terms. Her father fled China after Tiananmen Square, arrived in Oakland with nothing, worked his way through law school, and has raised 5 children on his own. He brought her to the ice at just 5 years old, and she took it from there. Watch her skate, and you see something extremely rare, not just excellence, but joy and clarity. A young woman so completely herself, an Olympic arena becomes a place of joy and freedom. That is an American hero, not despite where she came from, but because of it. Oakland is proud, Alyssa Liu. We honor you today. Thank you, sir.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 60 minutes as the of the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and still I rise, and still I rise. And I rise today, Mr. Speaker, a liberated, unbought, unbossed, unafraid Democrat. I rise, Mr. Speaker, after having been censured but not silenced. censured, but not silenced. Yes, I am that person who chooses to take on some of the great social injustices of our time. And there are times when taking on these injustices necessitates that we take action right here in this chamber. And I'm proud of the things that I have done to call to the attention not only of the Congress, not only of this country, but to the attention of the world, some of the injustices taking place in my country. Quite frankly, the country that I love because of what it stands for in its great documents, liberty and justice for all, as extolled in the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes, I sometimes have to take difficult positions. And when I do, I sometimes have to face difficult consequences. But I do so, and still I rise, Mr. Speaker, and still I rise. And today, Mr. Speaker, I rise to address corruption within the Trump administration, corruption within the Trump family, corruption within Trump politics. And I want to show how this corruption is encroaching upon something that is very sacred in this institution. So let me start now, Mr. Speaker, with corruption within the Trump family. Within the Trump family. Mr. Speaker, I had the preeminent privilege of being a part of a hearing today in financial services. And this hearing had to do with fraud being perpetrated. Well, I want to talk about corruption being perpetrated. And I spoke about this at the hearing today, and I shall revisit some of these things that I called to the attention of the public at the hearing today. The first is a news article. It is styled, "Trump Meme Coin Down 96% as Bitcoin and Meme Coin Slide." This is the Trump meme coin. This article is dated February 9th, 2026. And I shall read excerpts. It reads in part this: last February, the coin market's capitalization stood at $3.5 billion. We're talking about now the Trump meme coin. $3.5 billion. Already well below its $14.5 billion peak on the eve of his second inauguration. When the Trump administration took on the task of being president again, which I regret occurred, to be quite candid with you, but when it did, it also, at the same time, by and through Trump, the person, introduced a meme coin. That meme coin stood capitalized at $3.5 billion. Well, this is $14.5 billion at its peak. $3.5 billion later, at its peak, 14.5. Today, it has fallen to $1.78 billion. To repeat, so as to allow people to completely understand, initially, it was capitalized at $3.5 billion. It then made an upward move to $14.5 billion. This was at its peak. And today, this is following February the 9th, it fell to $1.78 billion. Why is this important? Why is it important for me to call this article to your attention? Because there is something called pump and dump. Pump and dump. This is where clever people will create something such as a meme coin, and they will instantly start to put money into it. But they use famous people, And in using these famous people, this name identification in and of itself brings credibility to the product that they're placing in the market. And that credibility causes the product to move rapidly in its value. It goes up. And as it goes up, the people who are pumping it, they then find reason at some point to take out their profits. They take out their profits. They pump it and then they dump it, meaning they get rid of the product. They no longer want it. And when they dump it at its zenith, they take out great profits. They make not only millions, but billions. They remove the profits. Let me read on. The indication is a large-scale pump and dump scheme involving at least 15 cryptocurrencies, including the $ millennia, that is the currency of the president's wife, whom I have great respect for, by the way. I really do. I have met her and found her to be a very pleasant lady, but I've observed her from afar, and I have great respect for her. The complaint alleged that First Lady Melania Trump was used as a window dressing for a crime engineered by other persons. But the point is this: engineered by other persons, but the Trump family made large sums of money as a result. In fact, I have a second article that is styled Melania Trump's Mean Coin Architects Accused of Pump and Dump Fraud. Pump and Dump Fraud in a lawsuit. This one is dated October 23rd, 2025, and it's from The Guardian. And I would beg that people would peruse these at your leisure so that you might acquire additional intelligence about the articles that I'm calling to your attention. This one says the $ millennia coins were released for just a few cents each on 19 January, the day before Donald Trump was inaugurated as US president. Day before he becomes president, the coin is released. And then within hours, this coin price soared to 13.73. Went from a value of a few cents, just a few cents, to $13.73, $13.73. However, it then collapsed almost as quickly and is now only worth about 10 cents. Went from pennies to $13.73, collapsed less than 10 cents, about 10 cents. And that is less than 1% of its peak price. This coin traded at a peak of $45.47 and now goes for $5.79. The article also indicates that the Trump family has pocketed more than $1 billion in pre-tax profits from several cryptocurrency-related products and companies over the past 12 months. 12 months pocketed more than $1 billion in pre-tax profits. Pumping and dumping, allowing consumers to be left holding the bag. Many people who assume that because the president's name is associated with it, or a family member of the president is associated with it, they assume that it's credible. And then they do incredible things. They just buy into it because they assume that the name itself gives it the credibility that will cause them to make large sums of money. Well, some people do make large sums of money. These are the people that introduce these coins. These are the people that pump them up. And these are the people who take their profits right off the top at the zenith of the market for the coin. This kind of scam, this kind of scheme is something that we should not tolerate emanating from the highest office in the land. The President of the United States is in the business of performing what I call a hustle of the country itself, of the market itself. The president uses all sorts of scams to make money based upon the fact that he is the president of the United States and his name should bring some sort of credibility to products that other people will buy into and lose money. I regret that this happens, and the best way for us to stop it right now, immediately, is for people to understand that the president's name is not worth what it appears to be worth. And people should not buy into these scams simply because the president associates his name with it. At some point, the president and family members will take their money out. And when that happens, the dumping starts. And when the dumping starts, those consumers who bought in good faith end up losing money. Pump and dump. Raise the price, sell, dump, and leave others holding the bag. They take the profits. But this kind of corruption is not limited to just the family of the president. Just today, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Nome, has been relieved of duty. Good reason why. Just today, I spoke about this at the Financial Services hearing when we talked about this corruption. Good reason why. Here's an article styled, "Firm tied to Kristi Nome secretly got money from 220 million DHS ad contracts." This is indicating that the secretary had these contracts within the purview of her jurisdiction, and that there were ad companies that were advertising on behalf of the federal government. These ad companies received some $220 million in DHS contracts. Now, well, maybe that's not all bad. Ad companies make money. Ad companies should make money when they perform a service, a worthy service. But there's something about this contract and some of these that are a little bit different. By the way, this article is dated November 14th, 2025. November 14th, 2025. ProPublica is the publisher. And I would like to read just a bit more about this before I go on. This contract, let's read. Advertising firms make money by taking an often hefty commission. Federal records show the contracts have gone to two firms. We're talking about the secretary now and her contracts that were let under the jurisdiction of her office on her watch. The contracts have gone to two firms. One, a Republican ad company in Louisiana called People Who Think, which has been awarded $77 million. That's not the bad news. But the majority of the money, $143 million. I repeat for emphasis, $143 million has gone to a mysterious LLC in Delaware. The company was created just days before it was awarded the deal. Days before receiving a $143 million contract, a mysterious LLC was created in Delaware. $143 million. Friends, if it really walks like, looks like, and quacks like a corrupt duck, then that's probably what it is. And that's what this is. $143 million, just created company. Well, the president and Ms. Nome have had a little bit of a disagreement about this, it seems. President denies any association with this, as he always does. My speculation is Ms. Nome is correct when she gives the indication that the White House approved of what she was doing. And of course, the president, he doesn't know anything about anything at all associated with some sort of corrupt activity that he might be aligned with. And in this case, Ms. Nome is the person who's going to take the fall. She's been removed from her position. By the way, there were articles of impeachment filed against her. I'm one of the persons who signed on to them and believe that she should have been impeached. She has been moved now to some other position, but I think that Ms. Nome should be removed from the government, from the offices of the government. The good offices should not have Ms. Nome associated with them after this incident with the contracts, but more important than this is about money. I think that what has happened with human lives that have been lost, innocent persons, 2 people, American citizens, 2 people, unarmed, 2 people participating in peaceful protest, 2 people who have lost their lives. These people have families that are still in mourning, And the president and Ms. Nome, they just move on, go on to the next big scam, scheme, the next big thing that the president does that's questionable. For example, going to war without conferring with Congress, deciding that on his own volition, he can just take nuclear-powered aircraft carriers into a position off of the coast of a country, engage in gunboat diplomacy, and then after he concludes that the diplomacy has not succeeded, simply decide he's going to go to war, and so much as say it. And then we decide we here in Congress are going to take up the cause of being Congress people, the cause of the Constitution, which accords the power to go to war, conferred upon the Congress, placed within the hands of the Congress. Each member of Congress will have a voice and a vote. When we decide we are going to take up this challenge and say to the president, you can't do this. This is wrong. And it has to stop. Well, my Republican colleagues will cover, and they do a good job of allowing the very power that has been accorded them, placed and entrusted to them in the Constitution of the United States of America. They now delegate that to the president, even when it is in contravention of the Constitution. And it is, because there was no imminent threat to this country from Iran. No imminent threat, which is one of the reasons why I voted against this resolution 1099, I believe is the number for it, because it had in there that Iran is a threat to the United States. Iran is not a threat to us. We are a superpower. Iran is not capable of harming us. But then they say, well, in 10 years they could. Well, in 10 years, a lot of other things can happen. But I don't think we should simply go to war because someone says to us that Iran is a threat to us when we know better. We know better. Our intelligence would tell you better. Iran is just not a threat to the United States of America. And as such, I don't think we should be at war with a country that is not an imminent threat. Not an imminent threat to the United States of America. Iran is not an imminent threat to the United States of America. So we shouldn't be at war with Iran. I voted today for the War Powers Resolution, the Connor Resolution, a resolution sponsored by 2 members of Congress. I mentioned Connor, but this resolution is a resolution that we should respect, and we should make sure that history shows where we stood in such a time as this when the resolution was presented to us on the floor. I absolutely believe that if there is an imminent threat, then we can allow the president to have certain latitude. But without that, it should not be done. So I want to thank Massey, Representative Massey, and Representative Connor. Massey was the lead, I believe, and Connor was there with him. I thank them both for what they've done to bring this to the floor, and I regret that the resolution did not pass. Moving on to the Trump politics, the corruption in politics. The corruption in politics emanates from the president having decided that he will simply take in mid-decade congressional seats from various states wherein Republicans have the ability to do this because Democrats happen to have seats that are coalition seats where different groups have joined together and they're electing representation of their choice. Well, the president said that down in Texas, let's take 5 seats from the Democrats and award them to the Republicans. And the governor of the state of Texas, being the loyalist that he is to the president, complied completely, totally, and absolutely as best as he could. I'm not sure that he will succeed when the final bell rings on election night in November. I'm just not sure, but they've made every effort to do what the president has demanded, being the loyalists that they are in Texas, the attorney general, the governor of the state. And as a result, these seats were removed. 5 seats, one of them in Houston, when the 9th congressional district and the 18th congressional districts were combined, meaning one less seat in Houston, Texas, on the Democratic side. And when this was done, it created mass confusion, unbelievable confusion. And there were people who were prognosticating all kinds of things. People were saying that certain members were not going to be returning. And all of this prognostication has been, unfortunately, derailed because the persons who were engaged in it didn't quite succeed like they thought they would. And they won't succeed like they think they will. It's amazing how this corruption now brings in the crypto industry. The crypto industry has decided that they are going to target people around the country, spending not $1 million, but millions of dollars. The crypto industry would, if they could, control the Congress of the United States of America. I am one of the people standing in their way. I will continue to stand in their way. They graded me out and I got an F. I am as proud of that F as I am of any A I've ever received in life. I'm very proud to say that the crypto industry does not find favor with me. They believe that those who receive A's from them should be rewarded by eliminating the opposition in Congress that is to them, the opposition to them in Congress. So the crypto industry is on a roll now. They're going to go around the country, going to buy congressional seats, and that's what they're doing. They buy congressional seats. They buy a reputation for people who are running on their side of the ledger, and they then spend just millions of dollars on ads to try to remove people who are antithetical to what they're doing with their crypto program, the program which entails as little regulation as possible. The best use of crypto right now, cryptocurrency, seems to be that of allowing those who are engaging in blackmail and extortion to move large sums of money without it being traced. There are billionaires who would love and are enjoying knowing that they can move large sums of money without it being traced, because these large sums of money can be used for nefarious purposes, or they can be used for evasive purposes, evading taxes, large sums of money, unregulated, because it can just move from one person to another in a flash. Blockchain technology is a wonderful thing. But the problem that we have is, and the thing that I consider a problem for this country, is the impact that crypto may have on the dollar, and the fact that these dollars do not move through a central bank, meaning from one person through a central bank to another person. At some point, we will find that cryptocurrency can be used to fund nefarious operations against this country. But how do you prove it right away when the money moves from one person to another without going through a central bank? Well, I want to see this regulated. I do. And I'm going to continue to want to see it regulated. And I'm going to continue to fight to have it regulated. This is something that I believe is going to injure our interest rates when we borrow from other countries if it has an adverse impact upon the dollar. The dollar is the reserve currency of choice across the globe, meaning countries hold dollars in reserve in their coffers. This is something for us to cherish and to protect the dollar as a reserve currency. Well, there are some people who are trying to knock the dollar out of this place. There's a war for currency supremacy. And in so doing, the dollar, if it is diminished in some way, our interest rates could go up. So we've got to be careful in terms of having the supremacy of the dollar continue. Cryptocurrency could conceivably have an impact on the dollar. I've had some to tell me that it can, and they're concerned about it. These are experts. My hope is this, that we will wake up and understand what is happening with the cryptocurrency purveyors, the people who want to take control of Congress. Anyone who is antithetical to them, they're willing to spend millions, untold millions, to remove people from office. And we have to take a stand against this. I will take that stand. There are many who will stand with them, but in doing this, something else is occurring. When they can take the congressional seats by drawing lines and simply taking them, and then if they can take them by using cryptocurrency, and these are friends of the president. They're friends of the president. They're all in this together, the current president with the cryptocurrency persons who would desire to control Congress, as the president would desire to control it. And for the most part, right now, he does. Well, these people, when they use this cryptocurrency, they're using it to take away seniority. Seniority. They want to get rid of senior members of Congress, and they're using their crypto dollars. They're really American dollars, but they're using this money to remove people from office, and they're going after senior leadership in Congress. Now, senior leadership is important in Congress. Senior leadership means that persons have been here, they've served, and they understand much of how this great institution functions. And they understand also how to get things done efficaciously. But there's something more important than all of this as it relates to senior leadership. If we decide that seniority no longer has any merit in the Congress of the United States of America, and that's the direction we're moving in, if we decide that seniority no longer has any merit in the Congress of the United States of America, money will rule. And when money rules, many persons will lose. A good many of them will be people who just don't have access to billionaires, millionaires, people who are exceedingly wealthy, who can fund their campaigns. And these campaigns are being funded. There are people who will say, well, I don't take money from corporate America. I don't take corporate dollars. Well, no, you don't. But you got the corporate, well, the money from these corporations in these independent expenditure accounts that are actually funding the campaign. So that is a clever way to avoid saying you're getting the money into your campaign, although it benefits your campaign. So these companies, they're spreading this money out in huge amounts to benefit campaigns. And they're taking people out, the seniority out. So seniority matters. It does in Congress. And if we allow this to occur, the seniority, the means by which some people move up, if it no longer exists, then money will rule. And if money rules, we will lose. We cannot allow money to dominate more than it does currently, because it already has an outsized influence. But if we allow money to take complete control, no seniority, I assure you, then people who just don't have access to the billionaires, the multimillionaires, the very wealthy, they will not have access to Congress. Then people who look to certain people to bring up issues that are important to them will get them not as a primary consideration, not as a secondary consideration, not as a tertiary consideration. I'm not sure where they would rank in the hierarchy of considerations, maybe quaternary, I don't know, but I do know that they won't be primary. And as a result, what happens to people who are here championing the cause of the very poor? The people who believe that Social Security is an investment, not simply an entitlement. The people who believe that there ought to be Medicaid for people who cannot afford insurance and who are living sometimes in the streets of life. The people who understand that Medicare is something we have to protect because the insurance companies don't want you after you become a certain age. There are people here who fight for these things. That fight can be minimized. And don't you think for 1 second that there are not people who wouldn't take that money that is now in Social Security in the government's hands and put it in the stock market. There has already been efforts to tamper with Social Security. I stand and fight for these things: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I have a history and a track record of fighting for these things. And we fight and we win. We win because you still have these programs. If we had lost the fight, you wouldn't have Social Security as you know it now. Texas was offered $100 billion for Medicaid expansion and rejected $100 billion. Texas did, and we have to fight to get these things done. And that fight will be limited to people who are wealthy in and of their own right and can afford to take on the crypto giants, can afford to take on the very wealthy. It would be fights among the very wealthy and the puppets of the very wealthy. And when that happens, this country is going to be a country that can no longer say that it stands for liberty and justice for all. How can it be justice for all if poor people who need health care can't get it? How can it be justice for all if Social Security is minimized or placed in the stock market and is subject to the whims of the market? No, the system that we have is a tried and proven system that works well. So we have to protect it. And we have to protect it from the crypto corruption that is finding its way into Congress to take out senior leadership and to destroy the system by which persons get there after having served for some time and being a senior person in line to have the opportunity to serve as a leader. That's pretty important for people who don't know millionaires and billionaires. So finally, I think it appropriate to talk about not only how the corruption has permeated the Congress and how the corruption is right before our eyes in the stock market, where pumping and dumping is taking place, how the corruption is taking place as it relates to persons who simply are trying their very best to engage in the process of buying and selling stocks, but find themselves on the losing end. All of this corruption is taking place before our eyes, and we have to do something about it. And I think that the best way to do something about a thing is to go to the root of it, the root cause. What is it that is at the very essence of the thing? Well, this corruption is aided and abetted by a president of the United States of America who's engaged in the corruption and the skimming and scamming in the stock market. He is president who would take seats from one side and award them to another side just to maintain power, to make sure that he stays in office. He said as much that he's afraid we'll impeach him, and he's right. This president, he's at the root cause of this. If you look around the world, you see all of the turmoil that he's creating around the globe, across the globe, using the military at a whim. He's taken on certain things that we just never expected a president to do. We always thought presidents would have a certain amount of dignity, a certain amount of decorum, a certain amount of principle. This man has no principles. He does whatever he chooses when he chooses. and he knows that he's got the backing of a Congress, that would be the House and the Senate on the Republican side, not the Democrats. And he has, to a certain extent, the backing of certain people on the courts that are loyal to him. I regret to see all of this happening, but I do know this: there is a solution that the Constitution has given us here in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate. This is why this was instilled in the Constitution, this remedy that I'm calling to your attention. It was put there for a time such as this and a president such as Trump. This is why it's there. This is why we should use it, so that we would honor the framers of the Constitution and their infinite wisdom in understanding that when someone is placing himself above and beyond the law and being aided and abetted in the process, then there has to be a means by which that person can be dealt with. And it is political. It is intentionally political. The process is political. The process is such that you can bring that person before the bar of justice right here in the House of Representatives. And when that person is brought before the bar of justice here in the House, every member has a vote. And do not let people calling themselves constitutional scholars try to convince you that it is anything more than what President Gerald Ford said it was. President Gerald Ford said this process is something that is lawful whenever 218 members say it is, assuming that that's the majority on a given day. Whatever the majority says it is in the House, there is no appealing the decision of the House. No member has to say why they voted the way they voted. You vote. You vote your conscience with this process. And when you vote your conscience with this process, if you vote to do as they did in a bygone era with Andrew Johnson, as they did with him, they voted to impeach him because he spoke ill of the House of Representatives. So don't let people convince you that it has to be something that is more than what the will of the House says it is, because it's not appealable. It is comparable to an indictment in the House. Not the same, but comparable. And then if this process functions as it should, it goes over to the Senate. And then the Senate takes up the process. And the Senate can try the president. And if the president is convicted, the president can be removed from office. Now, this process, you've been wondering what it is, I'm sure. This process is one that we have a countdown on, and I am absolutely committed to it. There is a countdown to impeachment. Impeachment is the process. This is what the framers of the Constitution accorded us for a time such as this and a president such as what we have. Impeachment. There is a countdown to impeachment, and yes, Mr. President, quake in your boots, because I will tell you the truth. You will be impeached. We're laying the foundation for it right now. You're going to be impeached again. And there are people who would say, well, if you can't get him convicted in the Senate, why impeach him in the House? Because we want posterity to know that the House of Representatives did its job. Let the Senate then have the opportunity to do their job. We send bills to the Senate all the time that we know the Senate won't pass. We do it all the time. We did it for tens of years with health care, knowing that we couldn't get it done, and we finally did get what is called Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, but that didn't happen overnight. Many times we sent legislation over to the Senate that doesn't pass, and we do it now. But when it comes to impeachment, the persons who don't want to see it will say you shouldn't use that same paradigm. You shouldn't send it over unless you know the Senate's going to take it up and pass it. Well, if that's the case, we wouldn't send most of what we send over to the Senate right now, because we can't pass it, and Senate won't take it up for whatever reasons. And I'm talking about from the Democratic side. So we should not allow that to become the acid test for whether we're going to do the right thing. The right thing to do is to impeach him right here, send it over to the Senate, and give the Senate an opportunity to act. I'm committed to this process. I do it as a matter of conscience. I do it as a matter of conscience. I do it because I believe that we shouldn't allow this country to just go down the tube, or down the drain. I don't want to see my country on the trash heap of history. This is a great country, and it can be great if we remove the stain from its conscience that the president has imposed upon it. This is our time. We are the people, and we can change this because this president is truly unfit to hold the office that he holds. And there are people who will defend him to the nth degree. And I cannot understand how you can see all that is happening to this country and still defend this president's actions. We now have found ourselves devolving into authoritarianism, and then what lies beneath authoritarianism? One person rule. One person rule, meaning more so than one person with cohorts. One person alone ruling a country that extols liberty and justice for all. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's where we're headed. I stand in the way with some others. I don't stand alone on this. There are others who are with me. But the people in this country are going to rise up and demand impeachment. In fact, they're already doing it. They're just waiting on us to catch up. Well, I'm going to help us catch up. There is a countdown to impeachment, and I'm guaranteeing you, I'm assuring you, that there will be additional articles of impeachment brought before this House of Representatives, and I do it as a matter of conscience. And I do it knowing that there are people who are going to spend all kinds of money to prevent me from doing it. Let them spend. But I will leave, if they do succeed, knowing that I gave it my best. Every day that I was here, I gave it my best, and I pledge to you, you will continue to get my best. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. The countdown to impeachment continues. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
I thank the Speaker. You know, this past weekend in Austin, Texas, near where I live, we had a tragedy where an individual shot a bunch of Austonians, including several University of Texas students, at a bar on what we call West 6th Street, in an area that I frequented often when I was in law school, a little less often these days, but it's an area that's a fairly normal place for people to go, not generally perceived as dangerous. And this past Saturday night, early Sunday morning, even as I believe I was returning home from San Antonio Rodeo, where I'd been there, I wake up in the morning to find out that there were 3 people who had been killed, and one of whom was a shooter, and then later a third or a fourth person would die, a third victim. And it was an unnecessary, senseless act, but it's compounded by not just normal violence, but why this individual was here in the first place. And I think we've got to wrestle with some serious questions about who we allow into this country and why. The individual who killed these students, by the way, there were multiple others who were shot, having surgeries. One young woman, young student who was shot multiple times in her abdomen. Another young man who was shot in his head. So it's not just the 3 dead victims, other people who are hurt, other people who are traumatized by it. And the individual who did it was wearing a Property of Allah sweatshirt, had a Quran in the back seat of the car that he had traveled in, was wearing an Iranian flag t-shirt under the property of law sweatshirt. And what we know about him is that he came here from Senegal in 2000, overstayed his visa. 2006, he obtains LPR, or legal permanent residency status, under the Bush administration. I'm going to be an equal opportunity basher of administrations who have failed to secure our border properly, and did so on the back of supposedly a marriage to an American citizen. Fast forward to 2012 under Obama, he gets full citizenship, which Obama was handing out like candy, and then tries to get status, LPR status, for 2 additional women, allegedly women he was marrying. I don't know whether in succession or at the same time. All I know is he was trying to do that. Fast forward, he was arrested for a hit and run alleged in 2022. And my fundamental question is why are we importing people who are deeply at odds with the values of our country and Western civilization? Why are we doing that? Why have we done that exponentially in the wake of the attacks of 9/11, 2001? It doesn't make any sense. This is avoidable. This man didn't need to be in the United States, who does not share our values, clearly was interested in serving his convictions for Iran and radical Islamism more than his commitment to this country, peace, and our rule of law. I'm going to have more to say about that, but related to this topic, I'm proud to be the co-founder, alongside my friend and fellow Texan, Keith Self, a veteran, a great public servant, longtime public servant, a great friend who shares my conviction. I won't speak for him, but shares my conviction for ensuring we defend our values, our Western civilization, the rule of law in our country, that we stand up against the Islamist movement, putting Sharia law forward in direct conflict with our laws. And I know my friend has a limited time, so I would like to yield some time to him to speak on this subject that concerns us both so greatly. And with that, I will yield such time as he shall consume.
Thank you very much to my really good friend, fellow Texan colleague, and co-founder of the Sharia Free America Caucus, Congressman Chip Roy. First of all, I've been aware of and been involved in Iran since 1979. I commanded a Special Forces detachment, 18, at that time. And while the trigger was not pulled, I was in a forward deployed battalion, and we were prepared to go in early to get the hostages should we need to. We had just come out of we had literally just the week before, I believe, come out of a shooting house in northern Germany where we had actually rehearsed a hostage rescue. I also was involved in Iran in 1984 when the 82nd Airborne Division was preparing Op Plan 1004. So I have been cognizant of and aware of Iran and planning for Iran since the late 70s, since the Ayatollah took over. Mr. Speaker, we have in the United States one constitution, one legal system, one supreme law of the land. No foreign code, no religious legal system, no ideology that rejects our founding principles has any place here. Just this week, as you've heard, on March 3rd, 2026, Texas Republicans delivered an overwhelming message that cannot be ignored, should not be ignored. Proposition 10, which states that the state of Texas should prohibit Sharia law passed by, get this, 95% landslide in the Republican primary. Texans are saying loud and clear, American law only. Sharia is not compatible with our Constitution, and our constituents reject any attempt to import it. This non-binding proposition is a clarion call to this Congress. Protect our sovereignty before it's too late. And tragically, just 2 days before that vote on March the 1st, we witnessed exactly why this mandate is so urgent. In Austin, Texas, as he just outlined for you, a gunman opened fire on innocent people enjoying their night. He killed 3 young Americans. We always say their name. 19-year-old Ryder Harrington, a Texas Tech student, 21-year-old Savitha Shawn, a University of Texas student, and 30-year-old Jorge Peterson, and wounded 13 others, some critically. The suspect, as you've heard, a naturalized U.S. citizen originally from Senegal, entered the United States on a B-2 tourist visa in March of 2000, overstayed illegally, married a U.S. citizen in 2006 to adjust status to lawful permanent resident, was naturalized as a full citizen in April 2013, despite a history of both before and after of arrests before and after receiving his green card. Our broken legal system let him in, let him stay, and disturbingly made him one of us. Naturalization. Investigators found him wearing a sweatshirt emblazoned with "Property of Allah," an undershirt featuring an Iranian flag design, and recovered a Quran from his vehicle. The FBI is investigating this as having a potential nexus to radical Islamic terrorism tied to U.S. actions involving Iran. These 3 young lives, full of promise, dreams, and futures, were stolen in an instant. This is not random violence. The symbols were unmistakable and intentional. Property of Allah references to Iran and a Quran at the scene. This attack was direct, bloody manifestation of the supremacist ideology that Sharia promotes, one that claims divine authority over man-made law, demands submission, and justifies violence against those who stand in its way. Islam, steeped in Sharia teachings that reject equality under the law, free speech, and constitutional governance, is not some abstract debate. It arrived here through failed vetting and immigration loopholes, took root over the years as a legal resident and citizen, and struck at the heart of Texas. The enemy is inside the gates. Wake up, America. We don't have to accept this. We don't have to watch leaders, Republican and Democrat, allow individuals from regions hostile to our values to enter on temporary visas, overstay, marry their way into permanent status, naturalize despite red flags, and then unleash terror on our streets. This horror is precisely why Proposition 10 passed with such overwhelming numbers, because Sharia ideology fosters the very extremism that turns foreign loyalties or personal grievances into mass murder on American soil. This brings us to the heart of this matter. Sharia is not merely personal religious observance. It is a comprehensive political and legal system that stands in direct conflict with everything we hold sacred. As Karl Popper warned in The Open Society and Its Enemies, unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. In the name of tolerance, we must claim the right not to tolerate the intolerant. Although, I admit, we unfortunately have to tolerate the Democrats. Sharia, as a supremacist ideology that demands submission and rejects our freedoms, falls squarely into this category. It refuses to tolerate dissent, equality, are our nation's law. To preserve America's tolerance, liberty, and open society, we must firmly reject and refuse to accommodate Sharia. Unlimited tolerance for such intolerance would destroy the very foundations of our tolerant republic. Sharia includes clear, real-world practices that directly violate our Constitution, such as wife beatings. Although in America, you are prohibited from breaking your wife's bones. I mean, it's disturbing that we even have to say this. Forced child marriages and child genital mutilation, death penalties for apostasy, which is leaving Islam, and blasphemy. Harsh penalties like hand amputations for theft, stonings for adultery, and public floggings, and systemic inequality. Women receive only half the inheritance of men, their courtroom testimony counting as half a man's value, and non-Muslims treated as second-class citizens. Sharia explicitly asserts supremacy over man-made law, explicitly, directly contradicting we the people and the very foundation of our Constitution. The Austin attack is a tragic, real-world illustration of what happens when elements of the supremacist ideology take hold here. We cannot afford to ignore the warning signs any longer. That is precisely why Congressman Chip Roy and I launched the Sharia Free America Caucus. It has grown rapidly to dozens of members, now 46 strong, from across the country representing 22 states. The caucus's mission is clear. Ensure Sharia never gains a foothold in America. Protect the Constitution as the supreme law, secure our borders against ideologies that refuse to assimilate, and defend Western civilization. We will not surrender our freedoms. I urge every colleague, Republican and Democrat, who believes in American sovereignty to join us. Mr. Speaker, the American people expect us to defend the Constitution against any ideology that seeks to replace it. Let us pass legislation affirming that no court may consider Sharia or any foreign religious code. Let us strengthen vetting to keep out those who adhere to Sharia. Let us advance the Pause Act to freeze immigration until our system is secure. And let us stand with the Sharia Free America Caucus and declare once and for all, America must be made Sharia free. So, Mr. Roy, I represent a district in North Texas. You represent a district in the Hill Country. How bad do you think the Islamization of Texas is for a dialogue?
Yeah, I think my friend who has very well laid out the extraordinary problem we have as a country if we allow Sharia law to take root. People say, well, yeah, just dismiss it. It's not a big deal. This is just a problem in Europe. You hear that all the time, right?
Absolutely.
And the fact is, it's a real problem here. And it's not just Dearborn, Michigan, where some people get some headlines. It's not just New York City right now, where you now have Mayor Mamdani and, prayer calls in the middle of Manhattan. We have, and I'll let the gentleman expand upon it, 300 plus mosques and more mosques being built every year in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. We have Epic City, which you can comment about in your own backyard. We have a massive Islamic center in Houston, a massive Islamic center north of Austin, an Islamic center in West Campus. You say, well, Chip, why is that a problem? Right? People can believe what they want to believe. They can build these things. These entities are expressly putting out and advancing Islamism consistent with the plan laid out by the Muslim Brotherhood, in accordance with some 600 organizations designed to do it, to put a footprint here that is ideological and political, designed to take over our country. Would the gentleman agree?
Absolutely. Texas has seen 48 new mosques in the last 2 years, just 2 years. That's roughly one every month. This is the fastest pace in the nation, and it reflects rapid Muslim growth in suburban areas like DFW, where I live, Houston, which is closer to where Chip lives. And frankly, it's not just in Texas. I was told by one of our North Carolina members just today that in his district, they plan to build the largest mosque in this hemisphere, I believe is the way he characterized it. So no, it is not just in Texas, but Texas is ground zero. My district, I believe, Chip, is ground zero because of this Epic City, because of the mini mosque. Epic City was going to be a 400+ acre compound, Muslim only, and if you invested a certain amount of money, then you might be able to buy a plot of land, you might be able to build a house, but when you sold the house, you had to sell it to the right person using contract law, using our own freedoms, our own legal system against us.
Is the gentleman familiar? I know he's got to leave here in a minute. Is the gentleman familiar with areas in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, even nearby your own district, in places like Richardson, in places like Arlington, a little farther away, in other areas, that some of our Texas women in particular, and generally, believed to be no-go zones, where there's areas where they are increasingly feeling uncomfortable, as if they are somehow immersed in the Middle East in areas that do not share our values of equality, of treating people respectfully, the same as peers, and where some of our women feel uncomfortable. Is the gentleman familiar that that is the case, and in fact, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, from what we understand?
Absolutely. I understand that from the local officials, and the women are not comfortable traveling there because, frankly, to quote an imam, women are animals created by Allah to be used by men. Women are no different from cows, sheep, horses, or mules. God made women resemble humans. Well, that's to me speaks, that is totally anathema to our vision of equality between men and women. Not that men are women, not that women are men. We can define what a woman is, but women have certain rights, individual rights under our concept of individual human rights. Under Sharia law, it is total submission. It is totally different. We need to understand that.
One last point, because I get thrown in my face quite frequently that, well, our founders would be appalled that we are raising these issues and questioning people's ability to carry out and practice their faith. I know that the gentleman is a student of our history and the Constitution, a student of military history, and I'm confident that he is well apprised of the engagement that Thomas Jefferson had with respect to the Barbary pirates and the Barbary Wars. And when posed with the question that Jefferson posed, said, well, why do you make war with us? And the response was, as the gentleman knows, well, we are commanded to in the Quran. Now, to which Jefferson was fairly appalled, as you would expect him to be. And then we had to carry out wars, right, to make sure our shipping lanes were open and so forth. But I know the gentleman's student of history understands that that conflict was very clear and present, even among our leaders as they were founding this nation in the Enlightenment, that led to the First Amendment, which we cherish, but the recognition of the direct conflict that the Islamic faith had, especially with respect to Sharia law being carried out against our values in Western civilization. The gentleman agree.
Absolutely. In fact, there is a term now that's being used, civilization jihad. This is the importation of Muslims who under Sharia. It reaches the accommodation phase. Yes, we'll pray in the middle of the street. No, you can't walk your dog on the public sidewalk. And then it goes to the intimidation phase that you were referring to earlier about women feeling unsafe on the street. We do not want to get to the position where Great Britain is, where they have rape gangs that kidnap young girls off of the street, take them, fill them full of drugs and alcohol, rape them mercilessly, and then the police arrest the young women for being drunk in public. We do not want to get to that point that the UK is currently.
Well, I thank my friend. I think he has to go to another engagement. I want to thank him for his leadership in working with me and co-founding the Sharia Free America Caucus. We now have, are we 46, 45?
46
members strong and growing. And I would invite colleagues on either side of the aisle to join. We should all be united in having a Sharia Free America. It is inconsistent with our values. I appreciate his leadership. I appreciate his public service. I appreciate his friendship. And I wish him well this evening.
Thank you very much for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, my good
And
friend.
I yield the gentleman to the
I
gentleman.
appreciate it. Thank you, sir. And look, I would just note, in addition to what we just talked about, there's this view that Europe is unique, right? And right now there are some 50 million Muslims that have now moved into Europe. You've now got France approaching 10% of its population. You have the United Kingdom at 7% plus of its population. In the United Kingdom, you have 85 courts carrying out Sharia law alongside the civilian courts. In Germany, you're at 7 to 8% of the population. Spain, Italy, a good chunk of Western Europe is now approaching 10% plus Muslim. And what question now is we're having a battle with Iran to take out their nuclear capability. At what point are we going to be concerned about a nuclear France or a nuclear United Kingdom? People say, well, Chip, that's awfully controversial. Is it? Is it really that controversial? You have majority Muslim countries that are refusing to send their kids to schools in the United Kingdom because they believe that the schools there are teaching a radicalized Islam that is more radical than they have at home. This is purposeful. This is being driven by the Muslim Brotherhood. This is not just happening in Europe, it is happening here. And but for an ocean, we would be Europe now. But after the massively open borders under the Biden-Mayorkas regime, with the increasing shrinking of the globe, and with totally irresponsible wide open borders and totally irresponsible legal, quote unquote, immigration policies by this country, we are importing people who hate us and hate our values. Why would we do that? Someone explain to me why we would do that. In the 25 years since 9/11, we have imported millions of people from countries that are diametrically opposed to our values. Why? Why would we do that? And why would we continue? I don't care what it is, H-1B, I don't care tourist visas that people tend to overstay and we never enforce. We have massive, rampant abuse of our so-called legal immigration system, and I'm sick and tired of hearing colleagues, and frankly, the administration, Republicans generally, people, governors, they want to go, oh, we love legal immigration. You just got to stop the illegal immigration. Well, of course we should stop the illegal immigration. It's like the basic duty of government. But why would you continue massive, widespread legal immigration from countries that very heavily, largely oppose our way of life and want to transform it? They do not wish to melt into the pot. They wish to take over the country and change it. Stop doing that. This is common sense. But common sense thrown out the window years ago. Everybody lives in this touchy-feely nonsense bull that they were taught in schools to say, well, you just got to open your doors to everybody. Your porch, just have your porch open. Everybody come in. Hold on. Why would you let people in who want to undo what you have? Like when you have people who wish to come here and achieve the American dream, when you have people who come here and want to learn our language, conform with our laws and our society, conform with our customs, conform with our heritage, celebrate and venerate our heritage, support in God we trust, accept our values as we have Moses sitting right here overlooking the House chamber. I'm guessing that Mr. Property of Allah here, who shot up people in my town and killed students at the University of Texas and a Texas Tech student, would not be too excited about Moses overseeing our chamber. Look, we have to make choices. We have 53 million-ish people foreign born in the United States, almost 16%. It's the highest percentage of our population in history. In the 1920s, in 1924 specifically, Congress restricted immigration after a massive explosion of immigration in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now, let's also consider at the time that while there were differences in cultures, German, Czech, Italian, whatever, predominantly these were people who shared Western civilization values, believed in our country. We're going to schools that taught that our country was great. We're going to schools that taught the Constitution. We're going to schools that taught kids English. And at the time, we were trying to build a melting pot. Yet even with that, we all recognize, whoa, 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 maybe we need to pause immigration because we've had so many people come here. We need a little resettling to ensure that everybody here knows what being an American means. So for the better part of 40 years, we pretty much flatlined immigration, constrained it to negligible numbers. And by the way, during that period, we ultimately were able to win a world war, ultimately have the baby boom post-World War II, grew the economy. And then sometime in the mid-1960s, we opened up the spigot. And we set forward now a 60-year march that's been a massive curve that's now exploded into the 21st century, in which we have brought masses of population into our country, but now increasingly people who flat out do not share our values, and worse, wish to eradicate our values and kill us. Again, to my colleagues who like to yap on the House floor or on news media about how great legal immigration is. Is this great? Is it? Now, look, I want to say that I'm not just making these numbers up. Since 2002, which astute observers of history will recognize was the year after 9/11, where 3,000 Americans were murdered by people who overstayed their visas, I would remind. All the friendly, oh, come join us melting pot folks that came over here on tourist visas, that overstayed their visas, and then flew airplanes into buildings. Since then, the United States has issued 4.6 million green cards or lawful permanent status to nationals from Muslim-majority nations, allowing them to remain here indefinitely. Now, I'm sure there are some of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle that come down and say, well, Chip, that's a good thing. Isn't that great? And having people come here and diversity. Well, is it? There's been a 48% increase in green cards to these countries from 2002 to 2023 since 9/11. Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Cameroon, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Malaysia, Mauritania, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Yemen. I'm doing that for the benefit of the stenographer. Meanwhile, Sharia is exploding. I said, no, it's not. Yes, it is. We have story after story of how that's being meted out in communities around our country, not always formally, but certainly in the communities, in direct contradiction to our Western values and our law. But we've actually had courts being propped up. For example, Governor Abbott in Texas had to go quash at least 2 courts that were being set up in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which is why I'm saying we should pause immigration. I introduced legislation in November to do that. Let's just pause all immigration. We can allow tourist visas so long as we enforce visa overstays. But we shouldn't reopen the spigots on immigration until we have revamped our badly broken H-1B system, until we've revamped the entire visa system, until we vet people for Sharia law or adherence to values inconsistent with ours, until we fix Plyler v. Doe, a wrong-headed Supreme Court opinion saying that we have to allow illegal aliens to be able to get educated here, until we fix our broken immigration system, which the next Democrat regime will exploit, as Secretary Noem testified to yesterday in the House committee, that would assuredly occur if we do not codify changes to asylum, codify changes to parole, codify changes to catch and release, that it will happen. And we haven't done it. By the way, the House hasn't even passed it this Congress. Why? Why haven't we passed it and sent it over to the Senate? Well, the Senate won't pass it. Well, we're hearing that about the Save America Act too right now. But why don't we just put more pressure on the Senate to do its job? Show up to work. Debate in the supposedly greatest deliberative body in the world in which they never actually deliberate. When was the last time somebody saw a great speech on the floor of the Senate? Between 2 senators engaging in debate. The greatest deliberative body in the world. There is more deliberation in an average high school debate than the United States Senate. And I've offended a few senators, apparently, by virtue of what a couple people said when I call it the nursing home and the Jell-O dispensary. Well, forgive me, not. Because you don't do anything. The Senate is nothing more in today's operation than the personnel office for the White House. That's it. And by the way, it's not even doing that fully effectively. Why haven't we passed the Save America Act in the Senate? Well, Chip, we don't have 60 votes. Does anybody know how the filibuster and the rules of the Senate actually work? 60 votes is one mechanism for shutting off debate. But you actually have to have debate to turn off. Have the debate. Put it on the floor. Oh, but they might offer amendments, and those amendments might be really tough votes for our members. Well, hell's bells. You might have to vote on something in the United States Senate. Who could imagine the horror of running for office to become a vaunted United States senator, and yet, oh no, I might be forced to vote on something. Heaven forbid that the United States Senate Republicans lock together, lock arms, have a strategy, and say, hey, why don't we just table all the amendments? I serve on the Rules Committee here in the House. We get amendments every week, gamesmanship by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. They offer amendments to put us in a bad position, to run ads against us that we're somehow the devil because we voted against puppies and children and whatever it is. Boo-hoo. Vote no, move on, put a message out. But the Senate won't do it because they're hiding. The United States Senate is hiding behind a fake filibuster, a fake 60-vote threshold that is not real. Put a bill on the floor of the Senate. Allow it to be amended. Table the amendments. Allow the speeches to go. Make them sit there and speak. Make them burn the clock. Make them sit there for weeks on end, telling the American people how they oppose that only American citizens should vote in American elections and that we should have voter ID to demonstrate you are who you are when you vote. Go sell that at home. But the Senate continues to hide. Say, well, we can't do that. We don't have 51 senators. We don't want to upset the filibuster. Chip, you're going to risk the filibuster. False. Fake news. We're saying use the real filibuster. Speak. Invite Mr. Smith to come back to Washington. Allow Mr. Smith to come into the chamber and show you what a real filibuster is. Because it isn't keeping the Senate in a quorum call while you go to fundraisers and steak dinners or go parade in front of the screens on the committees, come down to the Senate floor, have a few votes, and then fly back out after 2.5 days of work in a week. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was on the floor of the Senate for 3 months. 3 months. They were 25 votes shy of the then cloture vote to shut off debate. I mean, right now, we're, 10 votes shy. Put it on the floor. See what happens. See how many phone calls come into senators' offices. After a week, after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, you can pull it off the floor. If you got to move something important like DHS funding, if Democrats stop blocking the funding of Coast Guard, FEMA, and TSA. This is not rocket science stuff, y'all. But the Senate refuses to fight. The American people demand that we actually preserve the integrity of our elections. The American people believe that only American citizens should vote in American elections. They believe you should have voter ID. The Senate should act. The House should codify President Trump's executive orders, send them to the Senate, and then the Senate could do another talking filibuster. Man, they might have to show up to the Senate floor and force work. All of these things are related. Wide open borders, crime rates, organizations that are funding it, the advance of Sharia law and the Islamist movement in the United States. All of it is tied to large networks of Marxists and Islamists that are trying to remake the United States of America and undermine everything about our history, heritage, our rule of law, the Constitution, the Declaration. And the question is are we going to continue to remain asleep, kowtowing to corporate America, telling everybody what to do for labor, earnings per share, and the bottom line so they can get better reports from Wall Street? Because that's what's happening. You turn the management of affairs over to corporations. Corporations that continue to buy up land, buy up ranches, buy up farms, often international corporations, also almost often foreigners buying up American assets. Are we that slave to corporate America that we're willing to leave our doors wide open to the most dangerous individuals around that do not share our values? A lot of people think that the Sharia crisis is only in Europe and in foreign countries, that it has not yet arrived here. That is false. It is alive, well, and growing. And people are going to use the First Amendment incorrectly to hang us with it. They are going to pile weight upon the bow that is our system, and it will crumble under its own weight. While we fiddle, while America burns. Because we don't want to say uncomfortable things that we can all see with our own eyes. Why do you have to wait in line at the airport? Why can't you take a pocket knife in your pocket on the plane? Like we did for years. Why do you have to take your friggin' shoes off? Was it because of some nice Christian choir boys and girls from the local church in your community? Or was it because of the rise of the Islamist movement around the world? Was it from the Pan Am bombings and all the various terrorist attacks of the 80s and 90s, culminating in 2001 on 9/11? Open your eyes and see what the world is. Recognize the enemy before you and stop inviting the enemy into your home and then allowing your own rules to be used to promulgate your own destruction. It is a radical political ideology that is at odds with the Constitution, the Declaration, and the rule of law. We should act like it. We should tighten down our immigration laws. We should pause immigration. We should vet people for adherence to Sharia law. We should ensure that our communities stay safe and recognize the war that is being waged against us and take action. And with that, I recognize that my good friend from Arizona is in the chamber and is no doubt going to regale us with a tutorial on our debt crisis, the extent to which interest payments on the debt, the skyrocketing mountain of debt that is piling up as a result of mandatory spending in particular, demographic changes, our lack of use of great medical technology and other things that will allow us to save money and have a much better healthcare system and save our children from the scourge of debt and the interest payments that I talked about. I suspect he'll say something to those effects. And I think I've filibustered long enough for the gentleman to come. Yeah, sure, of course I will. Of course I will.
I no longer have to speak because he just took care of the speech for me.
Well, hey, can I always say something though? And with them, I'll turn it over to him because I got to go. But the gentleman, we poke each other and have a little fun. I'm certainly prone to give some speeches on immigration, border security, and other things, come down to the floor. I think the floor should be used. I wish we had actual real debate. I wish we had something other than special orders where you come down here and talk to an empty chamber. I think we should have 10, 20, or 30 of us down here for hours at a time debating serious issues. I think the American people would expect that. That's why I think the Senate ought to actually advance to debate. Don't be afraid of a real filibuster. But I want to say, as a compliment, that the gentleman has done this for now over a decade. I can't remember how long he's been in Congress, where he's been down to the floor and he gives those speeches. And I don't mean that as criticism, because that message has been consistent. And by the way, the big, beautiful bill last year was nothing like I know what he wanted nor I wanted. I wanted to go much further. But what we did get in terms of Medicaid reforms, what we did get in terms of spending reductions, $1.6 trillion of reductions and so forth. Again, not what we wanted. Would never have happened but for the groundwork being laid by people like my friend from Arizona, the speeches he gives on the floor regularly, making the case for how debt, interest, and so forth is killing our country.
Gentlemen, yield.
I would.
The classic problem of you're a brilliant lawyer. I'm sort of a walking accountant or walking calculator. We both serve different, and a lot of people in the public don't understand. We get different committees and they take over our life. You sit on judiciary. You sit, are you also on oversight?
I'm on judiciary, budget, and rules.
Yeah. Oh, so your life is
I see it all.
Yeah, your life is hell. And I do Joint Economic Committee and Ways and Means. And that's actually one of the elegance the founding fathers gave us, is we eventually end up where we're good.
Yep.
And in some ways, I always love the yin and yang thing here, where you're doing the legal stuff and then I'm going to actually sort of pound on the math.
Well, you do a great job of it. Keep pounding on the math. We've made slight progress with flat discretionary spending for 2 or 3 years and a little bit of work last year, the big, beautiful bill, but we've barely dented the problem. The iceberg sits in front of us. We're on the Titanic. A few of us are pulling the wheel, but hell, people on both sides of the aisle are pulling the wheel the other direction, and our kids and grandkids depend on us actually avoiding the frigging iceberg. So with that, I'm going to yield my friend from Arizona, or I guess I'm going to yield my time back. Yeah.
Gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the Senate or its members.
That takes the fun out.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Part of what we're going to do tonight is a little thick. Can you imagine that? But I want to walk through a handful of things. Even as Mr. Roy was just touching, I need us to understand what's going on in our math. Mr. Speaker, guess what? We hit sort of a record today for not being in COVID or one of our disasters. Every day, I send out a text message. It's part of our Joint Economic Committee. And I have a few thousand people that subscribe to this. And yes, it's a little geeky, but what we're doing is we're capturing the numbers from the Treasury Department. And we've built a whole system where we grab those and send those out. You'll be happy to know over the last 12 months, and this will make sense in a moment, over the last 12 months, if you divide our borrowing, just our borrowing up, we're now borrowing $83,720 per second. $83,720 per second. That is functionally, when you do the 12-month math, that is a new record. And yet, we have flattened out discretionary spending. So the things you actually get to vote on, I get to vote on, that's flat. But we only get to vote on about 25% of the spending. And this is why it's so hard to actually have this conversation here. The majority of our debt, I'm going to show some of this, and then I'm going to show where we have some of the waste and fraud and have to get the alignment, and then I'm going to give something I think is actually optimistic. But you got to understand, we have a shortage of children. We have functionally the same number of 18-year-olds today as we had 20 years ago, and double the number of 65 and up. We've known this was going to happen for a very long time. But it's almost like, is it because we're fearful of getting reelected? The White House gets cranky when we talk about these things, and it's Republicans and Democrats. So we come here and talk about shiny objects. But we have a math problem. In 33 months, over half the spending from Washington, D.C. government, from the government here, in 33 months will go to those 65 and up. And somewhere here, my 3-year-old is actually running around here. Yes, I'm insane. I have a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old. My wife's exactly my age. We have some math, and if you use a 6% discount rate, generational discount rate, you need 104% of my 3-year-old's lifetime income just to pay government pensions, federal government pensions, Social Security, Medicare, military, federal. And it's partially because we have so few children and so many baby boomers. No, it's not Republican or Democrat. It's just math. And we're going to do what? Because once more, the two primary drivers of our borrowing today, that $83,000 per second, what are the two drivers? It's interest and healthcare costs. Well, interest is a function of, we have $38.7 trillion of borrowing out there, and that has to go to the markets, and the market's going to set a price. When you hear the discussions about the Federal Reserve, that's the short-term portion. When you start getting over 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 30 years, that's a market. It's, you look at U.S. sovereign debt, and what do you want to pay? Mr. Speaker, think about this at the moment. Greece can sell a 10-year bond cheaper than the United States today. Does that set off any alarm bells? Is that just annoying because the hallways are full of people who want nothing more than more money spent? Look, you get two types of folks that come lobby you and walk in your office. And don't always think they're lobbyists. They're often constituents from home who walk in and say, we want more money, or we want you to control and regulate our competition. And I'm hoping somewhere here we can convince our brothers and sisters on the Republican side, the conservative side, that we believe in free markets. We believe creative destruction is a rebirth of an economy, and it should be happening constantly. And I know some of the populists don't like that, but the fact of the matter is, if we don't get remarkable productivity improvements, I don't know how we get wage growth. Remember, you're often not going, unless you can do something crazy in supplies, so supply side economics, you're not going to make prices go down. What you do is you make them more affordable by wage growth. Wage growth happens by two things. Inflation, well, that's just treading water. Productivity, you do it better, faster, cheaper through technology, through other systems, through redesign. That's how we raise wages. But what happens in a world where the estimated share of outlays that we're going to spend in government, so we have an obligation. The society made promises. You turn 65, you get your Medicare. You turn from 62 to 70 or 72, you can actually start to take Social Security. We made promises. If you worked for the federal government, you work for the military, you have pensions. But right now, my demographics, estimated share of outlays by group. So what does this government spend on populations? If you're under 18, right now we spend 7%, and the end of in 2036, it goes down to 6%. But here's the punchline. Right here, this is my 65 up in population. In the next few years, over half of our federal spending will be to those, and look, I'm only a year away now, to those 65 and up. Are we supposed to talk about this? Those are obligations. We owe them. But a point. You see this down here? In 2036, we're down to 12% of federal spending. 12% of federal spending is defense. 52% will be to pensions and healthcare. Do you see the scale? Remember, today, Social Security is the biggest spend, $1.6 trillion. Then what's the number two? What is the number two spend in the federal government? It's not defense, it's interest. Then it's Medicare. Then it's Medicaid and Obamacare subsidies, ACA subsidies. Number 5 is actually defense. Does that, as Chip Roy was just saying, I've been coming behind this microphone for over a decade. And I'm wondering, where are people's intellect? Is it you need the satiation of being angry instead of thinking through the scale? What takes down a republic? I would argue debt and deficits and these financing is what will take us down. And the bond market is now almost in the place where it will run this country. So let's actually walk through a couple more of these and see if we can sort of make the argument so it makes sense. The second half of this chart is, a personal opinion is garbage, but it's a projection. So I want you to just look right here, from this point here, 2025 to 2036. This is actually population of 18-year-olds coming down, because we can actually sort of calculate that right now. You've got to understand, ignore this stuff. By 2036, we have only 4 million 18-year-olds. The fact of the matter is, you tell me how I keep growth in an economy when I have shortages of young people entering the workforce, entering the economy. And I've done presentation after presentation. You're going to have to accept technology. You're going to have to accept synthetic biology. You're going to have to accept robots and labor substitution. If you want wages to go up in America and make things more affordable, one of the reasons President Trump has talked about this in many different ways, but the White House and others, we got a population problem. The math right now says the United States is fairly close to zero population growth. Do you remember your high school economics class where they taught you saying, hey, GDP growth is a combination of step-ups in productivity and population growth? What happens when we don't have the population growth? And no, you're not magically going to create an army of new little babies. Bless them. But this is not just the United States. It's all over the industrialized world. And oddly enough, the United States is still much better off than many, many countries. So France actually has a higher fertility rate than the United States, even when you adjust for their immigrant population. So we've been trying to promote what we call a unified theory that says the adoption of technology, the legalization of healthcare disruptions that will make us healthier, better, move to a truly talent-based immigration system, move away from the family sponsorship system. And President Trump has talked about this. Remember, he says it's insane we educate someone and send them home to compete with us. But there's about a dozen things on our unified theory, and you have to do them all at once. And it's one of the reasons I'm not running again. We had an agreement, I had an agreement, that we were going to do a second reconciliation. Part of that reconciliation, we were going to do all these ideas that saved money, but didn't take away services. We were going to get rid of the waste and the fraud and the misalignment and way some of the things are scammed. And that became too hard. So now we're back to borrowing. You do realize that $83,000 a second is $7.4 billion a day. And if you want something that's uncomfortable, and maybe I shouldn't talk about this, so that means I'm going to. Doge. I absolutely loved Doge's mission. But once again, you have to be able to execute it. You need members of Congress that are tough SOBs to execute it. When we started Doge, it was going to be $2 trillion. Well, excuse me, when the White House started Doge, it was going to be $2 trillion. Then it fell to $1 trillion. You can go to doge.gov right now. It'll be 200 and some plus billion dollars of identified savings. What have we actually executed? What have we helped them actually execute? About $7 billion. We borrowed more than that just today. Anyone see a math problem? So let's take a look at this one. Contributions by outlays alone to the 2025 1.75. And I also need to, we all fuss about this in our office. Last year's sort of official borrowing was $1.75 trillion. But understand there was a one-time kickback of student loans. If not, it would have been closer to $2 trillion. But math is math. So I need you to think about this. 17% of our contributions to that debt came from interest. 16% was the increases in national defense. The one thing it's in the Constitution here. But you start to actually take a look at the biggest spend, 29%, was our benefits to those who are 65 and up. Then you actually get over here 54 to 64, that's 10%. But when you get to our kids, those under 18, we spend about 8%. Now, when I say spend, this was things that drove borrowing. I'm trying to create a understanding that if we don't get our act together, we have really ugly things happening. 6.5 years from now, the Social Security Trust Fund is empty. 6.5 years from now, the Medicare Trust Fund is empty. This is a 24% cut to your Social Security check, and this is an 11% cut to hospital reimbursement. That is 6.5 years from now. And the scale on it, when I get idiots who go, oh, well, just raise taxes. I think the first year, which will be 2033, it would be 600 and, if you add them together, 638 billion. So the scale of this is monstrous. How often do you see us stepping up and saying, we're going to start working on this today because it's going to take us a couple of years to figure out how we're going to finance this? Are we just going to pretend? We double poverty of seniors in 7 years. We have a math set that says we'll double the number of baby boomers who live on the street 7 years from now. Does anyone have morality around here, want to just do the right thing? And the idiocy from some of my Democrat colleagues of, well, we'll just raise the cap on this and that. If you actually do sort of the calculations, you get a nice spike for a little while, but it only covers about 38% of the shortfall. This is not easy. And then many of us come up and say, okay, we got also another math problem. Being on Ways and Means, we're supposed to actually manage the revenues into the state, into this federal government. What happens when we have really good GDP growth, but a lot of that isn't coming from labor, it's coming from capital expenditures? Mr. Speaker, as you already know, we are an income tax-based tax system. We tax your capital gains, we tax your wages, we have then FICA taxes, which are your Social Security, your Medicare, your unemployment. What happens when much of our economic growth is coming from capital expenditures and not the taxes on wages? We're actually sort of seeing the force to have a discussion of how do we finance the future of this government. But are we allowed to do that? It's reality. And so here's a question for anyone who's crazy enough to be watching. And I always find this interesting. We will get some folks who, tomorrow when this thing goes up on YouTube, who fuss, the chamber is empty. It's just the way it is at night. But we're on like 1,000 televisions around the campus, and hopefully there's some poor intern who is stuck having to watch this. But we're probably on several 100,000, maybe 1 million television screens around the country of people that have either you're freaky smart or you have no life and you're trying to find a way to fall asleep and you're watching C-SPAN right now and some guy trying to do a semi-economics and debt and deficit lecture. But for those of you who do care, you start to walk through this math and say, how do you actually deal with the fact that these trust funds go empty in the next couple years and our mix is changing, and yet the groups that make their money trying to... All right, let's do the question. Is borrowing a tax? Mr. Speaker, it's a simple question. Is borrowing a tax? It's money we owe, and we have to pay interest on it. It's a tax paid for by a future generation. Just as inflation is a tax on your savings. but we can hand out things. So last year, for every dollar we took in tax receipts, we spent $1.43. Now this year it's better. With what President Trump did, what we did here, we pushed down some of the spending. We made our first adjustments in Medicaid. And even then, the spending still goes up. It just goes up slower. Our guess is this year, for every dollar of taxation we collect, we're going to spend about $1.33, $34. My math is closer to $1.36. But you can't do that very long. So let's actually walk through some of the things we've been analyzing as the Joint Economic Committee. I also chair the Joint Economic Committee. And I've come here and done detailed presentations from the MedPAC report and other things on something called Medicare Part C. It's Medicare Advantage. It's now 55% of the population. I really, really want to defend Medicare Advantage. I just want it to be more efficient. And we have a math problem. There's something in there where we have identified, and this is also from the MedPAC reports, we'll call it excess premiums for Medicare Advantage. And this last year, we think it came in at about $13+ billion. What's funky about this is part of that exposure ends up on Medicare Part B and Medicare Advantage, or traditional Medicare. This one's the traditional Medicare, this is the MA. And what that means is you're paying it. If you're on Medicare, particularly if you're on traditional Medicare, you're picking up a whole bunch of other costs. And the federal government's picking up about 9.9%, and the states are having to pick up some of the burden also because of dual eligible populations. Dual eligible populations are you're poor enough that if you're on traditional Medicare, Medicaid picks up part of your copays. But this is once again a mistake in the design of Medicare Advantage. We're transferring costs to other populations in Medicare. The punchline here, we had a fight in my office whether I should walk everyone through the whole formula, and I think I would have had no one watching on C-SPAN because it's complicated. But you need to understand, over a couple years, if you're on traditional Medicare, you're basically paying $2,589 more because of this misalignment here, where these costs are being shifted to the Medicare Part B portion. We have a way to fix this. We've offered a piece of legislation that basically takes Medicare Advantage and puts it back to its tradition, where you don't, try to make more money by the risk scores or the star ratings. You put it into the initial bid, and yes, you're going to have to do longer enrollments and those things. So the insurance company invests in making you healthier. And what we see is a healthier Medicare Advantage population uses less, and the companies can make a bigger profit. It's good for society. It's a good win-win. But now you have to make a decision. And this is, I'm speaking more to the Medicare Advantage lobbyists right now. If there's anyone out there watching, functionally zero is the proposal right now coming from the administration. So instead of redesigning the program and getting rid of, let's just call it, I won't call it waste and fraud, we'll call it the misalignment that's been identified in the MedPAC reports, whether they be 20% more than fee-for-service or a future one that may come down to 17%. But that's still, over 10 years, that's like $2 trillion of additional spending. Or you can actually get crammed down here, which is what's coming, or work with offices like ours that want to take the program back to its original design, where these insurers make money by helping their populations be healthier. Or you can basically start to just get undercompensated over and over and over. And Once again, let's come back to the basics. If you go back to the MedPAC report, this is just the overpayment portion. This is not some of the other things that are in the MedPAC report that drive us insane. That's $84 billion last year. We will sit here on the floor and fight for hours over a fraction of a fraction of a fraction on that, because this is hard to talk about. It's complex, and there's an army of lobbyists to stop us from doing it. But maybe we should learn to do the complex things, because once again, we borrowed $7.4 billion today. So let's do some happy talk. Last Saturday in Scottsdale, we actually did a joint economic hearing, a field hearing. We brought in some incredibly creative companies in the healthcare space. We had one there that has actually come up with a type of multi-cancer detection. I'm still having a little trouble on their technology. They think they can do it with a handful of drops of your blood that you could actually extract at home. And they put it on a plate, and they're looking for a type of peptide. It's not the ones you do when you're bodybuilding, a type of peptide that would help identify different types of cancers. They think they can get this product down to about $150. So you would do a multi-cancer test multiple times a year. We had the gentleman sitting over next to me over here. He's from Dr. AI. If anyone's watching, you're interested, go look. Utah has just done a sandbox with them. So the state of Utah, where the AI is doing renewals of your prescriptions. Why are we all doing that? There's ideas here where you had a revolution to crash the cost of healthcare. There was, Whoop was there, and they were talking about some of the things that are coming in the future where you can be basically wearing your medical lab on your body. It can talk to the Dr. AI, and then the healthcare provider there knows whether you need to come in or whether it can be prescribed to you just automatically. Mr. Speaker, my point is, if we could get our act together and start being creative and doing the hard things and stop making the technology disruptions, because they're functionally illegal today. You know, allowing AI to prescribe, allowing the wearables. Remember, the newest version of Apple Watch is an FDA-approved medical device for the heart. So just the thought experiment. Within its scope of what it's been medically approved, or excuse me, approved by the FDA, should be allowed to prescribe. Are we ready to start doing things like that? If we don't start telling the truth about the math, the next few years are going to be hell around here. And I won't be here for it, but you will. And is winning the next election that much more important than telling the truth? I'm in a 50-50 district. I get up into entire meetings on how to save Social Security, how to save Medicare, how to save these things. And I've been rewarded over and over and over. I think I'm one of the most expensive races and losses for the Democrats in all of America. You can win. Treat your voters with respect. Treat them as having an intellect, and treat them that it doesn't have to be a dystopian darkness if you're willing to innovate. But if you're not willing, it gets ugly. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair lays before the House the following enrolled bill.
Senate 723, an act to require the Bureau of Indian Affairs to process and complete all mortgage packages associated with residential and business mortgages on Indian land by certain deadlines and for other purposes.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 5th, 2026. I hereby designate the period from Thursday, March 5th, 2026 through Sunday, March 15th, 2026 as a district work period under Clause 13 of Rule 1. Signed sincerely, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the House stands adjourned until 1 p.m. Monday, March 9th, 2026.